Mountain View High was a bustling place, full of students from all walks of life. Each hallway echoed with chatter, footsteps, and the occasional teacher's stern voice reminding students to head to class. Among the many faces in the crowd was Alina, a girl who had been at Mountain View for 2 years. For Alina, these years had been memorable in more ways than one. It was here that she met Phoebe, her best friend, the person who knew her better than anyone else. It was also the place where she developed an undeniable crush on Blake. Blake was part of the popular three, a trio of boys who seemed to have it all: looks, charm, money, and in Blake's case, exceptional intelligence. While Jake and Jack were equally handsome and wealthy, Alina didn't spare them a second glance. It was Blake who caught her attention from the first day she stepped into Mountain View High. There was something about his calm demeanor, his sharp wit, and the way he carried himself that made her heart skip a beat. For the past year, Alina had made it a point to wave at Blake whenever their paths crossed. She had never gotten a wave back or even a hi, but that didn't stop her. The first time she waved at him, she remembered how Jake and Jack had exchanged puzzled looks while Blake simply stared at her like she was an alien. But Alina was persistent. She was never one to give up easily, especially when it came to something, or someone, she wanted. Monday morning rolled around and Alina woke up with a smile on her face. She loved school for one reason: Blake. She wasn't delusional. She knew the chances of him noticing her were slim, but the mere possibility made her heart race. As she got ready, she felt a small flutter of excitement. Maybe today would be different. Maybe today he would finally notice her. "Phoebes, do you think Blake will ever say hi to me?" Alina asked as she lay sprawled out on her bed that Sunday evening, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. "No," Phoebe replied bluntly, her tone matter-of-fact. She was sitting cross-legged at the foot of the bed, flipping through a magazine. "Why do you have to be so brutally honest?" Alina groaned, turning her head to look at her best friend. "Because I'm your best friend and I know you," Phoebe replied, meeting her gaze. "You've been waving at him for a year, Alina. If he hasn't said hi by now, he's not going to." Alina sighed, hugging her pillow. "I just want him to notice me, even for a second." Phoebe softened. "I know you do. But maybe you should stop trying so hard. If he doesn't see how amazing you are, that's his loss." The week dragged on until lunch on Wednesday. Alina and Phoebe were sitting at their usual spot in the cafeteria, talking about their favorite show when Phoebe suddenly tapped her on the arm. "Isn't that May?" Phoebe said, nodding toward a table across the room. Alina turned her head and immediately wished she hadn't. There he was, Blake, sitting with May, the most popular girl in school. They were laughing, and not just polite chuckles. They were full-on belly laughing, their faces lit up with joy. Alina felt a sharp pang in her chest, like someone had just driven a stake through her heart. She couldn't look away. Blake looked so carefree, so happy. She had never seen him laugh like that before. "Why does it hurt so much?" Alina whispered, more to herself than to Phoebe. Phoebe, ever perceptive, noticed the way her friend's mood shifted. "Hey, slow down," she said gently, noticing how Alina had started shoving food into her mouth without realizing it. Alina swallowed hard and put her fork down. "Just, I didn't know Blake could laugh like that. And none of those laughs, none of them were because of me." Phoebe reached out and touched her arm. "You really like him, huh?" Alina shook her head, trying to dismiss the question. "No, he's just a crush. I'll get over it." Phoebe raised an eyebrow. "Alina, it's been 3 years. That's more than just a crush. And by the look on your face, I'd say you're not over it." Alina didn't respond. She couldn't. Friday morning arrived and Alina walked into school with a heavy heart. She saw the popular three standing by their lockers, talking and laughing as usual. Her first instinct was to wave at Blake like she always did. But as she raised her hand, the memory of Blake and May laughing together flashed in her mind. She hesitated, then slowly lowered her hand. For the first time in a year, Alina walked past Blake without acknowledging him. She kept her eyes straight ahead, her posture rigid, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel Phoebe's eyes on her as they walked to class. "Are you okay?" Phoebe asked gently. Alina nodded, though she wasn't sure if it was true. For the first time, she was starting to wonder if Phoebe was right. Maybe it was time to stop trying so hard. Maybe it was time to let Blake go. Friday dragged on, and Alina felt the weight of her decision settle over her like a heavy cloud. She had avoided the popular 3 all day, not even glancing in Blake's direction during class or in the hallways. She told herself it was the right thing to do. What was the point of waving to someone who didn't care? But deep down, the absence of her small, hopeful gestures left an emptiness she couldn't shake. By lunchtime, Phoebe noticed how quiet Alina had become. Usually, they'd be laughing over some inside joke or debating which teacher was the worst. But today, Alina barely touched her food. "Hey," Phoebe said softly, nudging her friend. "You know you don't have to pretend to be okay with me." Alina looked up, her eyes glassy. "I'm fine," she lied, though her voice trembled with the weight of everything unsaid. Phoebe sighed. "Alina, you're not fine. You've been quiet all day. Did something happen?" Alina hesitated, biting her lip as tears threatened to spill. Then she shook her head. I think I'm done, Phoebes. I'm done trying to get Blake to notice me. What's the point?" Phoebe reached across the table, squeezing her friend's hand. "I know it hurts, but maybe this is a good thing. You deserve someone who sees you, Alina. Someone who doesn't need a year of waves to realize how incredible you are." Alina forced a small smile, though her chest felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. She knew Phoebe was right, but it didn't make the ache any easier to bear. Blake leaned against his locker that morning, tuning out Jake and Jack's conversation about their plans for the weekend. Their voices faded into the background as his eyes scanned the hall, searching for someone he hadn't seen yet, Alina. For the past year, she had waved at him every time their paths crossed. At first, he had thought it was weird. No one ever approached him without an agenda. Most wanted something from him, whether it was his time, attention, or the status that came with being in his orbit. But Alina was different. She didn't push or demand, she just waved, her small smile lighting up the dullest of days. He had never waved back, and he hated himself for it. Something about her gesture had unsettled him, though not in a bad way. It caught him off guard. It was pure, simple, and unassuming. A far cry from the performative admiration he was used to. But today was different. She hadn't waved. When she passed by earlier, her eyes didn't even flick in his direction. The emptiness it left behind startled him. Had something happened? Did she finally give up? The idea bothered him more than he wanted to admit. He stood there, frowning as the morning dragged on, his thoughts consumed by her absence. By lunchtime, Blake couldn't take it anymore. Jake and Jack were laughing about some stupid prank they'd pulled in math class, but Blake's mind was elsewhere. He spotted her across the cafeteria, sitting at her usual table with Phoebe. Her head was down and she was barely touching her food. "You okay, man?" Jake asked, nudging him. Blake nodded, though his attention was still fixed on Alina. "Yeah. I'll be back." Jake and Jack exchanged a confused look as Blake stood and made his way across the cafeteria. He ignored the whispers that followed him, the curious glances from other students as he walked purposefully toward Alina's table. Phoebe was the first to notice him approaching. Her eyes widened and she nudged Alina, who looked up, startled. "Hey," Blake said, his voice steady but softer than usual. Alina blinked at him, unsure if she was imagining things. "Hi," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can I talk to you for a second?" he asked, his gaze unwavering. Phoebe arched an eyebrow but didn't say anything. She nudged Alina again, urging her to stand. Alina got up hesitantly, her heart pounding in her chest. Blake led her out of the cafeteria, weaving through the crowded halls until they reached a quieter corner near the library. She stopped, crossing her arms defensively. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. Blake flinched slightly but quickly composed himself. "You didn't wave at me today," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. Alina stared at him, dumbfounded. "What? For a year you've been waving at me. Every time we pass each other," he said, his voice softer now. "And today you didn't. Why?" Alina felt her cheeks flush. She looked away, fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. "I didn't think you noticed." Blake's expression softened and he took a step closer. "Of course I noticed. How could I not?" Her heart skipped a beat, but she quickly masked it with a scoff. You never waved back. I know, he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. I guess I didn't know how to react. I didn't want to seem weird or... I don't know. Alina finally looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. So why do you care if I stopped? Blake hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor for a moment before meeting hers again. Because I got used to it. It was nice knowing someone noticed me for me, not because of who I hang out with or what I have. And when you didn't wave today, it felt wrong. Alina's breath caught in her throat, her walls crumbling under the weight of his words. She had spent so long convincing herself that he didn't care, and now here he was, proving her wrong. Blake straightened, slipping his hands into his pockets. Look, I know I've been a jerk for not acknowledging you before. But if it's not too late, I'd like to start over. Properly this time. Alina stared at him, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it. You mean that? Blake nodded, a small, genuine smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, I do. For the first time in what felt like forever, Alina felt the tiniest spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of her story. Maybe it was only the beginning.